Good morning. This is Haley Solomon with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us this morning for our housing call. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Director of Housing Policy, Stephanie Watkins-Cruz.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are having a great week so far. I'm going to go ahead and jump into organizational updates. So just a friendly reminder, our 2023 Housing Works Conference registration is closed because the conference is next week. Conference registration closed Friday the 13th, and since we're having our conference next week, there will be no housing call next week. But I hope to see most of you, if not all of you, at the conference anyway, so it'll end up working out just fine. Also, just a reminder that this is the last week to provide input on the county profiles and our resource feedback. Our survey will close on the 20th, so at the end of this week. We want your feedback. We've gotten a little bit more feedback than we did last year, so that's exciting. But please make sure that you fill it out. The survey is going to close in 3 days. Moving on to federal updates, HUD announced $212 million in funding is available now to expand the supply of affordable housing and supportive services for very low and extremely low income persons living with disabilities. This funding is available to participants specifically in the Section 811 Supportive Housing Program. This Section 811 is supportive housing for persons with disabilities, and it helps develop, subsidize, and provide supportive services for rental housing to meet the needs of this particular population. The CFPB and Justice Department issued a joint statement reminding financial institutions that they may not discriminate against credit applicants based on their immigration status, as well as other characteristics that are covered by the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, including national origin and race. The statement was issued because consumers have reported being rejected for credit cards, as well as for auto, student, personal, and equipment loans because of their immigration status, even when they have strong credit histories and ties to the United States and are otherwise qualified to receive the loans. Ohio Representative Jim Jordan is the latest nominee for House Speaker, and lawmakers plan to vote on whether to elect him later this afternoon. It is unclear if he'll have enough support to win. Majority Leader Steve Scalise had hoped to be selected as Speaker last week after he won a 113-99 vote over Jordan to be the nominee, but Scalise dropped out of the race on Thursday after the number of his opponents grew to 20. If Jordan does not win the vote, the House will start back at square one. And just a reminder, without a speaker, the chamber is unable to pass legislation, and this includes spending bills. And these delays in electing a speaker could increase the risk of a government shutdown in November, when lawmakers must either enact another continuing resolutions or pass final spending bills to avoid a shutdown. The current acting speaker, Patrick McHenry, a Republican from North Carolina, does not currently have the power to move bills on the floor, but there is an increasing talk of empowering him temporarily so that the House can move legislation like government funding and different aid to Israel. State updates. State health officials have announced that federal regulators have given their final approval for North Carolina to move forward with Medicaid expansion. The state will begin offering benefits on December 1st. An estimated 600,000 adults aged 19 to 64 who earn too much for traditional Medicaid but too little for subsidized private insurance are expected to benefit in North Carolina. So big deal, big changes coming for December 1st. In terms of legislative updates for our state, no votes were taken last week. We're still awaiting a timeline on the technical corrections bill on the budget. There has been a conversation about wanting to wrap up session by November, meaning that there could be several votes happening towards the end of this month. In local community updates, the Concord City Council voted to add a zoning overlay district with design standards that will permit the development of tiny homes and cottage homes. This newly created neighborhood infill residential district can be applied to the land designated urban neighborhood according to their 2030 land use plan. In Orange County, volunteers with Habitat for Humanity in Chapel Hill began to work on the new Weavers Grove community. This community is going to have 102 Habitat homes, 40 single-family market-rate homes, and 90 condos. The mixed-use community will also have a playground, a splash pad, a community center, in addition to bringing more affordable housing to the area. Residents of the Chatham Estates Mobile Home Park in Cary remain concerned about the future of their homes if their community is sold. Chatham Estates is one of the few affordable places left to live in the fast-growing town of Cary, North Carolina. It was put on the market in March, but as of this month, there is no buyer. Local nonprofits like One Wake are working to help residents organize, and residents say they are taking the matter to the ballot box to hold candidates to their promises of making Cary a place where everyone can live. Additional details are emerging on the lawsuit filed by Dare County municipalities challenging a provision in the state budget. I mentioned this last week, and then I also pointed this out in our summary of the budget, that there's a provision in the state budget that recently passed that exempts affordable housing projects funded by the state from the Dare County local zoning regulations. The state legislature allocated $35 million to Dare County to build new affordable housing, but the contractor hired by the county to build a 400-unit development has faced opposition over the locations it's considering for the project. House Speaker Tim Moore confirmed that the provision was added at the request of legislators from the area to be able to overcome issues with zoning. Moving to reports and resources, we have a lot of good reports and resources for you this week. I want to lift up just a few. The Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies put out a report talking about how with existing inventories being historically low, home buyers turn to the new home market and just the types of home products, at least in the ownership sense, that people are turning to. The Bipartisan Policy Center put out a great piece on expanding affordable housing opportunities and highlighting zoning and land use case studies and the relationship between those two really key policy elements. And then the National Alliance to End Homelessness put out another great piece. They've been doing a lot of work and hosting events and webinars around data. This particular report looks at the racial disparities in homelessness and how they persist, and this is a data snapshot by the National Alliance to End Homelessness. Moving on to events. In person this Sunday, actually, the Durham Candidates Meet and Greet. League of Women Voters is hosting this on October 22nd from 3 to 5 p.m. at Duke Memorial United Methodist Church. So if you're interested in that, we have the link in the call notes for you. The Greensboro Housing Summit is happening on October 26th. So this is being hosted by the Greensboro Housing Coalition. So if you just want to have a housing-filled week next week after you come to our conference, their conference will be on the 26th from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., and the registration link can be accessed in our call notes that we'll make sure to include there. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition is having their two-part webinar. They already had the one on the 12th. The webinar is called Our Home, Our Vote, Housing is Built with Ballots, showing the great connections, interconnections between voting and the impact it has on housing. The second part of the webinar will happen on October 26th at 2:30 p.m. And then another event that I will lead up that's particularly interesting sounding, that Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies is hosting on October 27th at 12:15 a webinar titled Are Millennials Leading a Back to the City Movement or Moving to the Suburbs? I don't know about y'all, but I'm not moving to the suburbs quite yet. Cannot afford it, but here we are. All right, we have a lot of other events and resources for y'all to check out. Those are just a few, so make sure you do take a look at the call notes for that. And then last but not least, we have several cool pieces in the news. There's one piece talking about a home in Durham that listed for $355,000, which was actually 25% below market value. And the catch is that this was using a sort of residential ground lease outside of the traditional community land trust model. So really interesting piece from the News and Observer about a kind of outside of the box ground lease model outside of what we normally see with community land trust. Also seeing several pieces addressing the need for housing for students. There's a piece on NPR talking about how U.S. universities and colleges are facing a huge demand for on-campus housing. That is no accident or coincidence. And then the Axios Raleigh has a piece that connects the sort of demographic changes in our state and how it could impact our future, and how our falling fertility rate in our state impacts who we have here and what that looks like for our communities. And then according to Realtor.com, there is a North Carolina town that is the #1 affordable pick for retirees. Again, another really key demographic change that really impacts our markets and the work that we do. There are several others. It's a pretty packed one this week, you all, but make sure you take some time to fill out the survey if you haven't already done so. And if you've already registered for the housing conference, great. We're really looking forward to seeing you all, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Remember, no housing call next week, but I hope to see many of you in person.